Whenever you want.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. I don't know if you will be able to hear me. Yeah, but I guess you will because there's not too many people. But the thing is that you can understand me because I sometimes tend to speak a little bit fast and maybe I close my mouth too much. That's a diction problem that I never could overcome. So I hope it doesn't get in the way. Am I still going to sit? Okay. Well, so that was me back in 2004, a very ancient time when we would use those cameras to take pictures, which is so retro now. But well, let's start with a little icebreaker. I see a lot of green. I also see a lot of blue over there, but the first color I kind of see is green for some reason. Is it that you are all in the front, or is it that there are too many Watsons now? Too many Watsons. Well, back in my day, there were very few Buchanans and a lot of Alexanders. But if you were to say, what would you guess my house was? Okay, raise your hand for Alexander. Raise your hands for Alexander. Okay, Watson? Okay, Haddon? Okay, there's a lot of Haddon. I'm a very popular Haddon. And Buchanan? Okay. Well, the winner is Watson. I was in Watson when I was here. Well, but let's talk about today. Do you know any of those logos in the picture?
Yes.
You know all of them?
No.
CC.
Okay, that's Comedy Central. That's probably the least known of those brands, but it's very funny anyway. Well, today I work for a company that's called Viacom, that is the owner of Telefe, Nickelodeon, MTV, Paramount, Comedy Central, and other brands around the world, but these are the 5 that I'm involved with at the moment. So, my job today, I work, as you may have guessed, I work on TV, and I'm working right now in a department that's called the Global Content Development Department. It's a very long name, but let's break it down. Content, as in we make the shows that you watch, or not, because probably all of you watch more Netflix than any of this, but let's pretend for a second that you watch TV. We make those shows. Global, because we do it on a global scale. It's not just Telefe, it's Nickelodeon, it's MTV, it's Paramount, it's international. And development, because we're in the development area. What we do basically can be divided into 3 columns. We create new ideas for shows, we receive external ideas for shows and we evaluate them and give feedback, and we also follow the development of shows that are currently on the air. So those are the jobs we do. It's a very exciting thing, at least for me, because I always liked writing and I have always been a little bit creative myself. So it was a good thing that I could finally get myself inserted in such a competitive media as TV. But let's talk about how English, because that's the point of this whole thing, let's talk about how English helped me get there. You know that guy?
Yes.
Okay, that's cool. I had to put the logo just in case you didn't know the guy. But yes, this man, Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, founder of Mac, founder of Pixar, which you might not know, once gave a talk in which he said that you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. When he said this, he was talking about how you get to the place you want to be. Right now, all of you may, or may not, but some of you may have an idea of what you want to do when you grow up, but you don't necessarily know how you'll get there. And it is impossible to see the actions that will take you from point A to point B when you're still at point A. But once you're at point B, you can look back and you can think of how everything fell into place. And that's where English comes in at least my story, or my board game in this case, because I also design board games. But that's not for today to talk about. Well, so, sorry. I'll check this now. Okay. So, when I left the one I was in high school, my next step was to go to Belgrano Day School. That's where I continued studying. I also attended Gaby's first certificate course for my first 2 years of high school. And it was, to tell you the truth, it was very helpful later in the game. Because after I left school, I knew that I wanted to study to become a filmmaker. So I went to, which I consider to be the best university in the country for that purpose, which is Universidad del Cine. And there's where my story begins. When you study filmmaking, they teach you a lot of things. They teach you how to write a movie, they teach you how to shoot a movie, they teach you how to produce a movie. But no one talks a lot about what to do with the movie once you finished it. Once you have a movie, oh, and one thing about that, we're talking about short films. Do you know what short films are, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. We're talking about short films, which is what you can afford to do when you're in college. And when you have a short film, you have two options. You can either say, yay, I got a short film, let's get all together, friends and family, and let's watch it. Or you can find a way to make it go beyond, to make it travel. Because around the world there are these things called film festivals. We have a very important one here in Argentina, Bafisi, which just took place last week. And these things happen all around the world, so language is kind of an important thing when you get into this. My first short film was completely silent, because I didn't want language to be a problem for any viewer anywhere in the world. So I made my silent film, which was Dormimos, 2 mimes. And I started sending it away to festivals. And one of the festivals that took it in was the DC Short Film Festival. DC Short Film Festival takes place in Washington, DC, hence the name. So, my short film was accepted into the DC Short Film Festival, and I had two options. I could say, yay, I have my film, the Short Film Festival, or I could use the opportunity and travel there. So I traveled. And of course, when I traveled, I was in Washington, D.C., and I had to attend a lot of parties and cocktails and dinners and whatnot, and everyone there would speak, of course, English. I had to give a little conference similar to this one back then for an American audience, so it had to be all in English. And I had the opportunity to talk to filmmakers from all around the world. Of course, the only language all of them knew for a fact was English. Probably the best contact I made there was a Brazilian filmmaker. But this Brazilian filmmaker, even though we were both South American, didn't speak a word of Spanish, and I didn't speak a word of Portuguese. So we had to communicate in English, and when we went back, when each of us got back to our countries, we kept in touch, we exchanged emails for quite a bit, and then one day he sends me a script for a series that he was planning to make. And of course, since he can't write in Spanish and I can read Portuguese, he sent me a copy in English. Of course, yes. So I read the script and I gave him my notes. I didn't tell him I liked it. I didn't tell him I didn't like it. I told him, like, scene by scene, dialogue by dialogue, everything that I would change. And he agreed with most of my comments. He was quite impressed, and he incorporated them into a new version of the script. And that script then he sold to Fox Brazil for a series. Now, that guy had a production company that specialized in animation. And so I started to work in animation for Brazil. I would do this from my very own bedroom. You know, I would wake up, drink my coffee, and I would sit on my bed with my computer. I didn't even have to change my pajamas because I was working from home, but I was working for Brazil. And these Brazilian projects were not intended for a Brazilian audience only either. They were intended to be sold for a global scale audience. So everything we did was in English, and for the following, I think it was 3 or 4 years, I worked for this company, writing scripts and editing scripts and consulting on scripts, and everything was done in English. Then one day, I had to travel to Brazil. I spent 2 weeks there, and I made another contact, another Brazilian guy with another project for another series. Well, so as the story goes, he sends me the materials in English. I grab what he had, we develop it together, and as co-authors, we sold it to Warner Brothers Brazil. Again, everything had to be handed in English. So I finished my studies in Universidad del Cine in 2015, and for the next 3 years, everything I was doing was this. I was making the series for Warner. I was making the series for Heiter, which is the name of the animation company. In fact, I even made a short with them. This is actually mine. In 2015, I sent it to a competition in, I don't remember what city, but somewhere in, I think it was Los Angeles. And well, I also won a couple of prizes in Brazil with it. But after I had amassed all this experience, I was lucky enough to get a job interview in what I thought was Telefe, but ended up being all of the above brands. I went to this interview, and Telefe had been bought by Viacom, which is an international company. So, the first requisite that you absolutely had to meet was speaking English. Yes, that was like the first thing that they asked in my interview. After that, everything else boiled down to what I had done. But truth is that everything I did professionally was thanks to English, because if you think about it, I started working in films in 2012, and I am in Viacom. I have been in Viacom since last year. So if you do the math, that's 6 years. 6 years of my professional career as a writer. I didn't write a single page in Spanish. Not a single page in Spanish. Everything was in English. So naturally, I went to this interview. They hired me, and right now I have this job I told you about, where English is again key. Last night, and this is true, last night I had, because this is the bad part of this job never sleeps, okay? Last night I was up until 2 a.m. Reading a new script that was presented to us. It's a script that was presented by an American writer. It's intended for an American audience, and of course, it's fully in English. Most of my teammates were hired back when Telefe was a national company and nothing else, so not all of them can read English. So every new content that comes into our office in English, I usually am the one leading it, which makes me go to bed at 2 a.m. sometimes, but most of the times is pretty rewarding. So all in all, the thing is that right now, being in 7th form, it's too tempting to feel that maybe you are at the end of something. But it's partially true, you're at the end of something, but it's not completely true, because you're at the beginning of something. Because right now you don't really know where you'll get or how you'll get there. So the best thing you can do, the only thing you can do, is stay flexible enough and have as many tools as you can. Because if you can't predict what will get you to where you want to be, you might as well use every weapon in your stash. So keep your English sharp. I mean, that's the best advice I could give you to stay flexible. Thank you.